Okay, I'm happy to show you that the white is gone. Really, getting the foreground washed in, such as it is, serves, for me, two main purposes. Three, if you include getting rid of the white blinding canvas. But other than that, I wanted very much to establish that we have a curve. Again, it's sort of the music of how a person looks through the painting. If you're starting at the top, you wander in, look at the shed, and wander out to the left. Your eye releases there. The structure, the composition is supported by various points of interest on the right-hand side, and you're allowing the light, the eye to wander off the painting here, but not with as high values as I'll have here or up in this direction. Here as well, but still not as strong as the values that'll be over here. The second one was to make sure that this was all in the shadow. And as you can see, I didn't care that much about how it went. By the time I was done taking my brush and scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing, eventually I just grunted, get it done, get her done. So I did. I knew that I wanted this to be dark. I knew I wanted this curve to follow around, I look at this and I think, yes, I could have done a better job of washing it in, but it's a wash-in. And there are things about it that bother me. I know what they are. I know what I'm going to do when I get to the to the actual painting. And I may change the wash-in a little more as I go along. But in general, I'm quite happy with what I've got here. So I'm kind of anxious to get to the big reward, laying in the overpainting. I'd like to tell you that the first thing I'm going to do now is pay attention to the sky. I like the shape of it. I like how it works with the painting. I'm really looking forward to jumping in there with some high value colors and giving some interesting shapes into this blustery sort of, passing rain cloud type sky. Vaporish, very, very vaporish, like mountain vapors that you'll see in amongst the mountains in British Columbia. I'd love to tell you that, but I might not, because every time I say something like that, I end up doing something else. I often want to jump into the main feature, right, into the main event, and just getting some strength in there, because it's so rewarding. And after you've done your drawing that's necessary, and you're happy with your drawing, and then you wash it in. And in fact, this looks much worse than the drawing did in a lot of ways, because it's kind of weak and mushy and muddy, and it's just been kind of labor-ish. Now I want a jolt of dopamine. Now I want to put in something that makes me go, oh, finally, this is starting to come together. It's showing an inkling of strength. That's why I will often do this. I'll jump into this. So we'll see. Regardless of what happens next, I do need to, when you work on that white canvas, and my darkest color, the color that I usually use for outlines is ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And when you're working on a white canvas, you start to lay in that dark color and, draw in over your charcoal lines. It looks so dark. To me, I think, oh, that's completely opaque. It's very dark. And then the rest of the painting gets washed in. And you realize that actually, it's not opaque, it's translucent. And you can still see, they're not very strong lines here. This one is because I've been over it twice to correct it. Here too. Various spots I've wanted to make corrections over the original outlines that were already dry. So you see the strength of those lines versus these. Well, I can't have that out competing this. So I'm going to need to take the same color and not thin it off too much. Thin enough so I don't leave ridges behind, but thick enough so that it is truly opaque. So that's, in a sense, your second coat on your wash-it. Excuse me. So that means what I'll do is take those colors and I will tidy up everything on the shed here. The distant hills, this post, at least everywhere that the foreground and the middle ground meets the sky, so that I have good strong lines. There's a good chance that once I start doing that, I'm just going to keep working my way down into this shed, because as you can see, a lot of the lines are fairly weak too. You know, minor corrections will happen. As you can see, you know, I have my wall leaning out a little bit here, or leaning to the left, I guess, here. And I don't like this. This needs to be more vertical. But those are small corrections that I'll do as I go along. For me to do it now is fruitless. For me to revisit it when I'm actually doing the painting, thus the importance of carefully choosing your lines and making corrections, and especially backing up from your painting before you make those minor decisions. You know, that's what I'll do when that time comes. But you know, if I do go in the shed right away, then I'm going to have to make all these lines a lot stronger. You know, I'm not going to promise that I'm going to shorten this fence, but there's a pretty good chance I'm going to. It's a little too, it comes a little too high. You know, from my original iteration of this scene, I was starting lower, and you know, there was more swale to everything. There was more up and downy movement, and I like that. And I'm getting a little bit weaker with that. Things are leveling off a little bit, which is good and bad in certain ways. But again, if I'm going to paint the shed, I'm going to focus on the shed only, not the stuff around it. If I'm going to paint the sky, I'm going to paint the sky only, not the stuff around it. Except for, of course, as I said, reiterating these lines, making these lines very strong. But, you know, the temptation is always to oh, I'm working on this, I like this area, you know, I like this area so much. I like this area so much, but this really bothers me, you know, I need to lay some lighter strokes down here. Get it out of your head. Never mind that, that's for later. You know, focus on the one area that you're playing in. And yes, of course you need to bear in mind what you're working on, or the area that you're working on, within context of the entire painting. But I think that if you've got a wash-in that's, you know, reasonably close to what you're going to end up with, you're not going to change anything too drastically elsewhere on the painting. So you probably don't have to worry about it. You know, one thing at a time. If you worry about more than one thing at a time, you start to get too worried, you start to get distracted, you lose your focus, you lose your mojo. I do anyway. And when I say you do this, you do that, I'm really talking about myself. Because as I said before, many times, I'm not telling you how to do things, I'm telling you how I do things. Anyway, at this moment, I'm guessing that tonight I'll probably strengthen these lines tonight, so that I can go right into the sky on Monday. Because these lines will have been dry enough, you know, by Monday morning that it's not going to be an issue. So sort of setting myself up for the next block of work, which, again, will be here. But I changed my mind too much, so you never know. Anyway, I'm happy to have gotten this far on it. I might sit outside for a while, actually enjoy some weather. They say vitamin D is good for you, and they say sitting in the sun, or actually mowing some lawn apparently is, you know, as long as it's sunny out, is good for you. Anyway, that's enough blithering from me. I'll see you later. I'm going to point at you anyway. We'll see you later.